This video is going to cover the brainstorming process and the thesis writing process for the comparison essay on the APUSH exam. When we are asked to compare things, we are being asked to identify similarities and differences among the things under consideration. Similarities are the characteristics that they have in common. That is, the characteristics that are shared between the two things. Differences are the characteristics that are unique to any particular thing. In some cases, these characteristics can be contradictory to other characteristics. The purpose of these comparison graphic organizers is to analyze how similar and different certain historical topics are within their historical contexts. On the surface, it may appear that the different topics have no similarities or differences, but upon further inspection, we often see that indeed many historical topics are more complex than we realize. But recognizing the similarities and differences is only the beginning of these graphic organizers' purpose. They ask us to dig deeper into our observations and to move from observation to evaluation. We should evaluate why there are similarities and differences between the two historical topics under observation. This is what the comparison graphic organizer page will look like. You will have two circles. It's kind of hard to see the one on the left here, that overlap in the middle. Okay, and of course there will be no writing because the one that you'll receive in class will be completely blank. But this is just an example. We're going to compare, which anytime you see comparison, that wants you to compare and to contrast. We're talking about Federalists and Democratic Republicans in 1792 to 1824. These are our first two political parties. And just like on the causation graphic organizers, we have to come up with our thematic learning objectives. Okay, again, these could be American and national identity, politics and power, work exchange and technology, culture and society, migration and settlement, geography and the environment, or America in the world. Our first thematic learning objective is going to be politics and power. And notice, not only is it on this half of the circle, but it goes for this half of the circle as well. So everything above this line is going to be dealing with politics and power. Our other thematic learning objective for the comparison essay is going to be work, exchange, and technology. And again, that is going to go for everything under the line. So notice on the comparison essay, you're only coming up with two thematic learning objectives compared to the three that you did for the causation essay. First, let's look at politics and power. Okay, remember, politics and power. This theme focuses on how different social and political groups have influenced society and government in the United States, as well as how political beliefs and institutions have changed over time. So on this half of the circle, we're dealing with the Federalists. Okay, these are people like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and John Adams. They believe in the superiority of the federal government over state governments. Okay, so they are Federalists. They believe in a strong federal power. Okay. During the time period between 1792 and 1824, we are not necessarily best friends with Great Britain, okay, because the War of 1812 happens in, obviously, 1812. But the Federalists are going to have a viewpoint where they want to support England, because England's kind of in a back and forth struggle with France. And so the Federalists feel that we should support England over France, and in doing so supported this neutrality proclamation, which was trying to keep us out of the conflict between France and Great Britain. On the other side, the Democratic Republicans, these are people like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. They believed in the power of the state government, okay, that They were very wary of how much power the king had in England, and so they wanted to make sure that the state governments collectively had more power than the federal government. And so, mirroring off of the Federalists, the Democratic Republicans wanted to support France in their fight against Great Britain. And so they opposed the Neutrality Proclamation and wanted to get involved in fighting. Or not necessarily fighting, but at least aiding the French. Okay. What similarities do the two groups have politically? Okay. They both believe in the Constitution. Okay. Members of the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans were at the Constitutional Convention. Okay. They believe that the Constitution defines roles for the state and federal government. It just depends on how you interpret the Constitution. Now let's look at work, exchange, and technology. This theme focuses on the factors behind the development of systems of economic exchange, particularly the role of technology, economic markets, and government. Okay? And so on the left-hand side we have Federalists, and again on the right-hand side we have the Democratic Republicans. Okay? Economically, Federalists believed in industry and manufacturing, so factories, okay, making things. Alexander Hamilton had a plan to cut back our national debt. It required the establishment of a federally operated bank. Okay, so it operates at the federal government level. They would have control over state banks. Okay, so the Federalists were very much for industry and manufacturing and a national bank that would control all smaller banks and therefore would be able to provide stability in the banking system. On the flip side, the Democratic Republicans were very much farmers and agriculturalists. Okay, they believed in farming and growing, and that's what would make America great. Okay, oddly enough, they will support the Louisiana Purchase, expanding our territory, even though it kind of goes against Thomas Jefferson's interpretation of the Constitution, but we're purchasing that from France. So again, that's kind of backing up their relationship with France. And they opposed a national bank. Okay, they believed a national bank would undermine state banks and state power. Okay, I could go on and on and on about the merits of this national bank, but that's a different story for a different day. How are they the same? They both believed in a strong economy. Okay, the Federalists obviously wanted it to be industry and manufacturing, and the Democratic Republicans wanted it to be agricultural based, but they both believed in a strong economy. Okay, we would be an international power through our trade and our commerce. It's just they differ on what are we trading. The Democratic Republicans want to trade crops. The Federalists want to trade manufactured items. Now that we have our graphic organizer filled out, it is time to switch over to focusing on writing our thesis. Remember, our formula is X. However, A and B, therefore Y. Your X represents the strongest point against your argument, or basically your counter argument. A and B represents your two strongest points that you will be arguing in favor of, and Y just clarifies your position. Okay? So if we go back to the graphic organizer, we need to label our A, B, and our X. Okay? And in my opinion, the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists were a lot different. Okay? So my main argument is going to be that there are more differences. So I'm going to write my A right here, my B right here, and my similarities in the middle will be my X statement. And so now let me pull up our thesis page, and we are now ready to write our thesis. The prompt says, evaluate the similarities and differences of Federalists and Democratic Republicans from 1792 to 1824. So again, our key word here is evaluate. And if you go back to your writing packet, at the end of the packet, it gives you essay prompt command terms. Evaluate Make a judgment by weighing up the strength and limitations. Okay, so you're making a judgment. Which, in your opinion, are there more similarities or are there more differences? All right, let's begin writing our thesis statement. So our X, okay, or our counterpoint is that there are similarities between Federalists and Democratic Republicans. So I said Federalists and Democratic Republicans both believe in the Constitution, the separation of powers, and having a strong economy based off of trade throughout the world. Okay, so Federalists and Democratic Republicans both believe in the Constitution, the separation of powers, and having a strong economy based off of trade throughout the world. So again, your X statement, nothing fancy. You just simply state it. Okay, your argument is going to come through your AB statement. Okay, so I wrote that, however, there seems to be more differences on how the Constitution should be interpreted, which level of government should have the most power and authority, and what our main economic focus should be. Okay, so, however, there seems to be more differences on how the Constitution should be interpreted, which level of government should have the most power and authority, and what our main economic focus should be. And so now we are ready for our Y statement, which simply just restates what we have come up with in our X and AB portions of the thesis statement. All I wrote was, therefore, there are more differences between the Federalists and Democratic Republicans than similarities. Therefore, there are more differences between the Federalist and Democratic Republicans than similarities. So again, very straightforward. When you're writing this on your essay, you don't need to single out X, A, B, and Y. It would all be one paragraph. I just wanted to show you in this way to kind of break it down. Remember, if you have problems remembering the comparison brainstorming process and thesis writing process, come back and recheck out this video. Thanks for watching.